Hey, and welcome to episode number 14. We are back at Sierra Lakes Golf Course, and this is going to be a little bit of a different episode. I'm not going to play, I'm not going to take a lesson, I'm not going to hit golf balls at all. What I'm going to do is we're going to talk about 5 things that I've discovered while playing as a single. I always come out and play as a single. I don't really have friends that golf. Some of the vocabulary that's used in golf, a lot of people don't know what that is. So I figured we'd make a video and discuss what each of those things are and show some examples. So let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is what the difference between an iron and a wedge is, because they're two very different clubs. They strike the ball in two very different ways. A wedge is what's called a bounce club, and if you look at a wedge, they're built very differently than an iron. All wedges have a bounce on them. They're meant to strike the ground with the bounce first. When they come in, you want to bounce the bounce on the ground and not take a divot. An iron is a leading edge club where it comes in and you want to lead the edge of the club into the ball. And this is going to play a pivotal contact. We talk about some of the lies that we have to hit out of sometimes, whether you want to take a bounce club or a leading edge club. But all wedges will have the bounce and none of the irons will have the bounce. So that's how you know the difference between a wedge and an iron. So the next thing we're going to talk about, which is a term that's used a lot, what's called a tight lie. So what a tight lie is, it means the ball is sitting tight to the ground. Now if you look back at the fairways now, we're in the middle of winter, which means that the fairway's not growing. So a lot of times you're hitting into the fairway, the ground is cold, that ball is sitting right down next to the ground. And we're going to show some examples and what it means when a club is trying to strike a tight lie. One of the hardest shots in golf is that wedge coming in from 40 yards on a tight lie, and we're going to talk about why that is. So here's a good example of a tight lie. We're on the fairway here on the 9th hole at Sierra Lake, and I'm going to try to make it quick, but if you can see, the ball is just right tight onto the ground, which means, especially if you're close and you're trying to use a wedge with the bounce, you can't get at the ball. You're just going to bounce and hit it thin rather than be able to get a bounce and pitch it up. Especially when it gets cold and the ground is hard, it's very difficult to make those. So to hit them correctly, what you want to do is hood the club a little more, place it back in your stance, and try to get down on it to get it up and out of the way. Remember, tight lies, tight to the ground, very difficult to get a bouncy club on it. Try to use leading edge if you can. Maybe even a pitching wedge is easier. The bigger the loft on your wedge, the more bounce you're gonna have. So that's some suggestions for a tight lie. Okay, so another thing I want to talk about is what spin does to a golf ball, right? All golf clubs, except for woods, all drivers and wedges have these grooves on them. And the grooves start from the bottom of the club and they work all the way up to the top of the club. Now the club is meant to be hit between grooves 4 and 6 towards the heel. So right here is the sweet spot of a club. And if you hit the sweet spot, is the most dynamic portion of the club and will cause the ball to go the farthest. Now, these grooves are meant to put spin on the ball. Spin on the ball will do 2 major things. The first thing it will do is it will shape the ball. If it's top spinning, if it's underspin, if it's left spin, if it's right spin, it's going to shape the ball flight. Underspin is going to cause the ball to balloon up. Top spin is going to cause the ball to come down and release. And then left and right spin will cause either a draw or a slice. But most importantly, what spin does to a golf ball is it limits the distance the ball will travel. The more spin you put on the ball, the less the ball will travel. And if you want to test me on this, go ahead and take a piece of tape and put it on your grooves and hit that club, and I guarantee you'll hit it 40 to 50 yards farther. I hit 7 irons 210 yards with tape on the grooves rather than using spin on it, and I hit a 7 iron about 185. So it's significantly farther with the spin on it, and that's going to come into play when we talk about flyer lies. So remember, spin will shape the ball, will cause it to either roll out or check up, but most importantly, it takes distance off your shot. The other kind of lie that's talked about a lot that not a lot of people understand is what's called a flyer lie. Now, a flyer lie happens because something gets between the club and the ball and doesn't allow the ball to have spin put on it. And whenever a ball doesn't have spin put on it, as we discussed earlier, when the spin is taken off a golf ball, it's going to travel a lot farther than it does if it doesn't have spin. So a flyer lie, the ball will travel much farther, and that's what you call a flyer lie. Okay, so we snuck out here on hole 9 to show you an example of a flyer lie. And so I placed a golf ball into the grass here to show you what I mean by a flyer lie. When you place the club behind it, you can see that we're gonna trap grass between the golf ball and the club face, which is gonna take all the spin off that ball, and it's just gonna jump and fly much, much farther than it would be if it were a regular lie and I could get the grooves of the club onto the ball. So that is a flyer lie. And if you have a flyer lie, make sure you take one club less and account for that extra distance. Okay, and just to wrap this up, one of the things that I've found that a lot of times understand, and as a single I golf with a lot of different groups, are the two different types of hazards that you find on a golf course. One is called a lateral hazard, and it's usually marked with red stakes. And a lateral hazard means you get distance. You get the distance that your ball went, and then you get to drop either on line with that or 2 clubs no closer to the hole. OB hazards are usually marked with white stakes, and they mean if you hit OB, you have to replay your ball from where you started. Very different kind of hazards, very different kind of penalties. Make sure you know the hazards that you're playing when you start. A lot of times they won't be marked. So for instance, if you look behind me, you see there's houses. Those houses aren't marked. So you can play those as what's called a lateral hazard or a red hazard. So if you hook a ball into the house, you get distance. Over here on the right side is the driving range. If you hit on the driving range, that's OB. And so if you go out of bounds, you have to re-tee or re-hit your shot from where you started. You're hitting 3 off the same spot. So just something to keep in mind. Want to stay away from the OB. Lateral hazards aren't great, but they're much better than OB. That's a good summary of the different kind of hazards. Those 5 things, you know, they might have been known, they might have not been known, but if they shine any light onto the knowledge of your golf, it hopefully has made a difference. And hopefully knowing what those things are helps you position your golf shots correctly. So I know it has done with me, when knowing what a tight lie is and knowing what a flyer lie is helps me select the golf club and helps me position my feet well. So we'll see you next time. God bless.